Hi, my name is Judah Mantell from Midnight Coffee Inc., and this is the first of what will hopefully be a series of devlog videos showcasing what I've been working on lately, in conjunction with the blog posts that I post as often as I can. So while I'm not ready to announce the full game at the moment, this is kind of just a gray box level set up to test certain things that I want to show you today. So to start, these hands are custom hands designed by me that are set up using the Oculus Avatar SDK with Unity. That means that when I pull the grip buttons, 3 fingers, triggers 1 finger, and I touch the thumbstick, I get that thumb. So I can do cool things like point, like this, thumbs up, or full fists. And what's cool is though they do work perfectly with the Oculus Touch controllers, they also work really well with the Windows Mixed Reality, the Vive, and hopefully the Knuckles controllers from Valve also. So it's very cross-platform. Now looking down over here, I have this little HUD, which is just a blood splatter texture set up to be a health bar. So every time I take damage, it decreases a little bit like that. These 2 circles are for placing items. So if I grab a little ammo pack, which I'll show in detail later on, you can put it in here, just like that. Now for object interactions, I want to be clear that this is not meant to be fully physics-based. Your hands pass through things. They don't collide with most objects. There's some exceptions, which I'll show you in a minute. But when you grab an object, depending on the object does react to physics properly. So they do collide with the world like that. Certain objects, like the gun, does not collide with the world because I didn't like the idea of possibly getting locked in a drawer or something. Because while it is fun having physics interactions, there are certain things that can go wrong that for a weapon that the player should always have, I didn't really want to risk. So for the gun itself, originally I did have a more realistic Glock-type pistol with a slide you have to pull back, and you have to put the ammo in the bottom, and I found it to be a little too realistic, and people playing for the first time got very frustrated with how detailed and how precise they needed to be when operating the weapon. So I decided to go for a little bit of a simpler approach with this revolver-type low-poly gun pistol thing. I don't know. What that means is that when you pull the trigger, it says 0 over here. There's a little heads-up display for the ammo amount. And you take one of these little cartridges. I know it's not how a gun actually works, but it's still fun and very self-explanatory. You put it in there, and you can fire now. And actually there's an enemy over there. I'm going to get to enemies later on, but let's just try to shoot him from here. There we go. These objects are throwing cards. Now, they interact just like any other physics held object, but they have a force applied to them when you throw it. So you get this really nice, somewhat realistic, snappy card throwing. Oh, there you go. Another thing you can do is force grab objects. So when I pull the trigger, I can point at an object, and a little cursor will appear there, and then I pull the grip button, and it snaps to my hand like this. Now this is not an animation. It's actually lerping its position using code to exactly where my hand is. Now, for certain objects, like the melee weapons, they are almost all physics objects, so they collide with the world, but for longer melee weapons, like the sword, as opposed to the dagger, I'm not currently holding the actual sword mesh like I am in every other object. I'm actually holding a proxy object, which is set up by the hilt of the sword, along here. And the actual mesh is set up with a configurable joint up against the proxy held object, so it bends around things you hold, or it bends around things you touch with it, in the way a sword realistically would, as opposed to kind of just going flat against it, which makes for some really cool, more satisfying and more realistic sword interactions. So for movement, it's worth noting that I do not have regular thumbstick movement, like many other games. In this game, you click in the thumbstick, and then swing your arms to move in the direction you're facing. Now other games like LA Noire VR has done this in the past, similar like arm swinging locomotion, but it seemed very, it seemed very uncomfortable and nauseating. And so what I like about this system is that it directly takes into account how fast you're swinging your arms, so you can run. And because it always goes in the direction you're facing, you don't have that uncomfortable side-to-side nausea happening. to jump, there's no set button. It's also purely based on your own body movements. So while you're clicking in one thumbstick to walk, if you click in both, and then propel yourself forward, you can jump across gaps like this. That. Now for some gaps that are too far to cross, so let's just pretend this is a lot farther of a gap, you can get the ability later on in the game to wall run. Jump into the wall, and I walk along the wall like that, and then I land. Now in terms of physics interactions, before I get to more enemy combat, like I said, certain objects do interact with your hands, whilst others don't. So the walls, your hands go through them, but doors will react with your hands, so you can push them around like you would an actual door. Similarly, enemies are active ragdolls, meaning that while they're in an animation, make sure he sees me, throw that away, I can push him around. And so while they do need some work on the AI front and their attack animations, I can push him around, kind of like a zombie. Now there's one more thing I want to talk about, and that is climbing. Because parkour is a big part of the game, hence the running and jumping and the forward movement, I want to get climbing right as best as I possibly could. So I played Boneworks recently, and like I said, this game is not meant to be purely physics-based. But what I noticed with Boneworks is that because it is exactly and very precisely physics-based, climbing is very kind of wibbly-wobbly and wonky and not very fun, just because I find it to be a little too difficult to get right. So mine is kind of the exact opposite. You grab it, you pull yourself up, and it's very smooth and relaxed and very clear as to what you have to do while avoiding nausea to the best of my ability. That being said, you can also go super fast to avoid things and whatnot. Now one more thing before I go, and that is this object, which is way too heavy for me to lift, and therefore it does react to collisions with my hands. Now there's an enemy down there, which I want to see if I can kill by dropping this.